Okay, welcome to another episode of Warriors Whiteboard Wednesday. Dai-shihan Miller here from Warrior Concepts, but you already know that. Anyway, so let's just jump right into things. This week, we're going to be taking a look at close quarter combat tactics, or sometimes known as CQC, for those who like acronyms, right? So from the ninja's perspective, anyway, so we're going to take a look at a bunch of these things, but let's do this. Let's start with a problem, which is what I usually do, right? And so conventionally speaking, and again, this is based on my experience, right? I've only been around in this art since 1980, late 80, early 81. So I don't know, a couple of weeks. Anyway, but conventionally speaking, ninpo-taijutsu, at least these days, and the way people are doing things assumes a mid to long range starting point, right? Where you keep him at a distance, right? Force him to work harder to get at you, that kind of thing, right? And that's perfectly logical, right? We start new students off that way, right? This is important, right? If I can control the distance, I control the fight, okay? This is not my idea. This is Hatsumi Sensei's entire video series from Quest, right? Was known as Masaki Hatsumi's martial arts of distance. If I control the distance, I control the fight, okay? But what happens when that breaks down, right? For any number of reasons. We'll take a look at three of them today. But what happens when that breaks down and we can't do convention? We can't do things the conventional way, right? I mean, if we look at the principles and concepts, the formula for good taijutsu, in ninpo, budo taijutsu, whatever, is leg work, spine work, limb work. Legs do most of the work. They also move first, and then the spine, and then the limb. Well, what happens? Okay, if you look at Hatsumi Sensei's book, Togakure Ryu Ninpo, which is also known as the Tenchi Jin-Ryaku no Maki, or the Book of Heaven, Earth, and Mankind, the Shidoshi Scroll. There's all kinds of names for these things, right? In the section on taijutsu, it spells that out, right? This is the way to do things. But, right, there's also an instruction in there that in those instances and times when you can't move your legs first, right, you have to do this other thing, right? So to illustrate this, let me tell you a story, right? A bunch of years ago, some of you guys already know this, and for those of you who don't, welcome to the catch-up story. I was a military policeman for almost a decade, way back, and one time I was serving in South Korea, and we got a call to a unit, drunk and disorderly. This guy had already punched officer and just call it breaking shit and all kinds of stuff. So me and my partner show up, and through all the yelling and screaming and all kinds of crap that was going on, find out this guy had earned his black belt in Taekwondo that day, and he went out with a couple of friends to celebrate. Okay, fantastic. Anyway, one thing leads to another. He starts trying out his moves on his friends. What started out is, oh, that's cool, dude, turns into, stop doing that, right? And next thing you know, they face plant this guy on a gravel driveway, and here's this problem that we are now dealing with, okay? And so I'm trying to quell this, and what ends up happening is I had a momentary lapse. Well, I didn't have a lapse in awareness because I watched him do it, but my training didn't really prepare me for this kind of situation. And one that ended up happening was this guy who was easily a couple inches taller than me, big, bulky weightlifter. We're suddenly nose to nose, and I'm smelling the sour aftermath of Lynchburg, Tennessee, for those of you who know your whiskeys. And it was offensive. And I said, you got 3 seconds to get out of my face. And next thing I know, I hear him say 2-1000. And on 3-1000, I mean, he's literally like right here, nose to nose, right? And all of a sudden, I feel something on my chest. And before I realized it, a fist was hitting my jaw that required me to roll off of. And then I found myself in this hoko no kamae, jamming up these attacks. And one thing leads to another. He ends up in a mushadori. I dislocate his shoulder, flip him over, get him into handcuffs, and the rest is fucking history. Because, right, he found himself minus some rank. I don't know. I think he ended up with a divorce after that too, because his wife and his son came in while he was doing his stupid stupid stuff. And anyway, so, but the point here is Soke's lesson, right? For those situations where you can't move your legs first, you move your torso first. Well, duh, you only have a choice, right? We move legs or we move torso, right? So in that instance, when that thing was coming up, I rolled that off, repositioned, and then I had nothing for I mean, what felt like minutes was probably just seconds. But he was coming in with these jackhammer hook punches, and I'm jamming these things up until his arm fell into a position against my arm, and my brain, I remember that moment, my brain went, oh, I know this one, and was able to zip that mushadori on this guy. And anyway, like I said, the rest is history, right? So in those times when we can't do conventional taijutsu principles, we have to do the opposite, right? But that's a part of the art, right? I'm going to talk about this in a little bit, right? The kata examples have this embedded in them, and I don't mean just doing henka, right? Have them embedded in them. Well, I'll talk about that in a little bit, right? So this is the same as like ground fighting, okay? One of the most important things I learned, and I've covered this in a previous Whiteboard Wednesday, the principles for ground fighting, most of them are opposite what they are when we're up and standing, right? And they're opposite because, right, one, our feet aren't on the ground and they're not the primary means of movement, right? We're on the ground, right? And two, most of your balance concerns go away. You're both on the ground. Most of the upright techniques are designed to break his balance, to either lock him in place and do something to him, or to get him stumbling and falling so you can take this guy to the ground, right? Well, if we're already on the ground, right? So anyway, right? And a lot of people will say, well, this stuff isn't in ninjutsu, so or it's not in Bujinkan, so I've got to go over to this art or whatever. I suggest they haven't trained long enough or with the right people. Anyway, so just my humble opinion, right? So, but here's the thing. The problem isn't the problem, right? I remember where I heard this the first time, and it sounds like it's an inside-outside kind of thing, but I get it, right? The problem isn't the problem. The problem is the way we think about the problem, okay? And that's not just a good self-defense idea or lesson. That's a good life lesson, okay? So anyway, before we jump into this, don't forget, like, share, subscribe, all that wonderful stuff, so we can teach the AI algorithms and whatnot that this is important. People need it, want it, whatever, so that it shows it more often, whether you're on Facebook, YouTube, I don't care, so that other people that are looking for stuff like this and want more than just step-by-step cool moves can find it, okay? All right, so let's do this. Let's start by looking at 3 types of close range conditions. What I mean by that is how you might find yourself in that situation, right? One of that story I told actually illustrates one of these, right? But we'll start with this as our premise for today's training. And the other thing we're going to do too is we're going to stick to situations where we're still standing, okay? Because if we're wrestling around on the floor, guess what? That's both ground fighting and close range combat, okay? But as long as we only think about it as a wrestling match, then we're only going to do wrestling things. You get the idea, right? Okay. So, but we've looked at ground fighting in other Whiteboard Wednesdays. If we get around to it, we will try to be mindful about posting a link or two in the description area after this is all done. But you can always just go to the YouTube channel and hit the live tab, and there's a whole scrolling thing of all the Whiteboard Wednesdays and all of the Kuden weekly podcasts that we do, right? So it's easy to find, okay? All right, so anyway, 3 scenarios where I could find myself at close range, right? In a little bit, I'm going to define 3 ranges within what most people call close range, okay? But for right now, let's take a look at scenarios and how we might get there, okay? So the first one is where he breaks through your defenses, okay? You're trying to do the cool stuff and you're trying to maintain that mid to long range kind of thing, and he slips inside. Next thing you know, the range is different, right? And so the same kind of footwork isn't going to work, all that kind of stuff, right? So he may close in to grab, he may close in to who knows, right? But either way, he's broken through your defenses, okay? The second one is a conversation. And again, these are just ideas, but I want to demonstrate it kind of different ways that it could end up there, right? So number two is, let's say we're having a conversation. That conversation turns into an argument. That argument becomes hostile, right? And next thing you know, he steps into a nose-to-nose range to put pressure on you. That intimidation shit where they do that kind of stuff, right? Or he grabs you and shoves you up against the wall, right? Which is kind of a combination number one and number two, right? So in this case, right, I'm just going to put nose to nose here, right? So this is that same story I told when I was an MP, right? A military policeman. Next thing I know, right, within a step or two, and I had this guy at bay, everything was good, but see, I turned to hand something to somebody and turned back, and he was already moving in, right? And he was right there looking down at me, this kind of thing. And what I heard was, I've earned a black belt, and this was the whole discussion. I earned my black belt. I don't have to prove how tough I am. But the last thing I heard as he closed in was, I'm going to show you how tough you're not. Cop or not, I'm going to show you how tough you're not. And then that was easy to dismiss. What I got caught with, and we'll talk about this some other time, with distractions and how pre-existing belief systems can cause us to either not pay attention to something or to escalate a problem or whatever. And in my case, it was a couple. And one, it was that offensive stench of stomach acid mixed with alcohol. And I was in the middle of issuing an ultimatum when he decided he was just going to punch me. Okay. So anyway, nose to nose, right? And then the third one is he's just on you, right? It's a surprise attack. It could be multiple attackers, could be a single attacker, whatever, where the idea here is where you're now in like a bear hug, or one or two guys have reached in and grabbed you by the arms and they're starting to lift you onto your toes, where somebody else is going to jack you or whatever, okay? Or they're just grabbing you to lead you out or to take you to a back room, or who knows, right? We've all seen movies, right? Anyway, so here it's a surprise, right? I was blindsided, right? And then now I have to deal with it because they're right there, okay? And often the angle and the positioning is just weird, right? I mean, there's little to no space, or the way they're positioned on my body, right? I don't work well in that direction, right? So again, they're close range. Angling's a different story, but it works into it as well, okay? So we're gonna be taking a look at some techniques during the Friday virtual class that will play around with these ideas. But again, most of the students that are coming to class are in the lower to lower intermediate, upper intermediate, pre-Shodan. We'll see who shows up for class or whatever, but this is going to be the premise, right, that they got in there. Okay, so let's go ahead and just keep going with this and take a look at these three ranges, because when people talk about ranges, right, in fights or whatever, right, they think of often what I teach on is 5, 6 ranges, right? So most people think of long range, mid range, and close range, and then they define them differently based on their fight style or whatever, which not a bad place to start, okay? But there's actually a range outside this one, okay? Call it long range. You can call it out of range, okay? Where they're going to need a weapon, or they're going to need to be taller than you, or whatever. They're going to have to really reach if they're even going to touch you. But I tend to call that out of range, okay? And so we need to know what those ranges are so that we know whether this guy is going to attack or how they might come in or whatever. Mid-range is pretty much what it is, right? That's where the fist and whatnot are happening. But close range what the hell is that, right? I mean, for a lot of people, well, that's where the elbows and the knees go, and or that's where like I'm putting my hands on them and I'm going to execute a throw, or yeah, I know, but this leaves that there's a lot of room for play in here. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at this and we're going to break it into three. We're going to start where I think most people tend to think, but again, I don't want to guess. Okay. So, but we're going to take this, we're going to break it down into three ranges. And then as we move through this, you'll get a better understanding of what I'm talking about. Okay. So I'm going to use the word close a lot, right? But standard close range. Okay. If you're taking notes, do it in a way that gets these things to mesh up. Okay. But this range, from my perspective, is elbow knee range. You can still hit them with an elbow or a forearm or something like that. They're in close enough that, like, jacking off to hit them, to try to get that kind of thing to happen, it's very difficult. And if you do wind up, you're leaving an opening, right? So we might be hitting them with forearms, elbows, that kind of thing, knee strikes, whatever. We're in that kind of range, okay? Well, you know what? I'll come back to these things as I go through. We're gonna make two passes through this, right? So the second one, I'm going to call this very close range, right? Now, let me be very, very clear about this, because I've had discussions with people and they're like, I wouldn't call it that. I'd call it, dude, I don't care if you call this Tom, Dick, and Harry, Fred, Susie, and Beth. I don't give a shit, right? Know the difference, because the amount of range, the amount of distance you have between the bodies is not the same, okay? This is closer. Very close range is now what I consider to be shoulder hip range. Okay. And I mean, like, knees and elbows, they reach out to, okay. But shoulder, he's in much closer, right? Okay. I might be able to drop a head on him, that kind of thing, but I'm going to save the head here for a minute. But head could be in there if I'm doing what most people think is a headbutt. But most people that do headbutts like that complain later in life about neck problems, and they don't know where they came from, except they consistently took this 7 or 8 pound bowling ball and threw it in a direction that the small support muscles and connector tissues in their neck were designed to hold. I mean, it's one thing if you do it once or twice over your lifetime, but if that's what you're doing every week or for a whole block of instruction, okay, very different, right? Which is why we teach headbutts very differently, right? So very close range is now shoulder hip distance, right? Where in here, I might jack a hip or slam a thigh or something like that, okay? And this, I'm not listing a lot of things in here. And the reason for that is when we think of hip, right? Even in a lot of Japanese martial arts, the word for hip is koshi, okay? So you'll see things like koshinage or something like that with the word koshi in it, okay? Koshinage, right? Hip throw, okay? Well, that sounds pretty obvious, right? And then people will be getting in there trying to like contort their body to make sure one hip matches another hip or whatever. The problem with that is that, at least for our art, right, developed way back before Admiral Perry. Here's a little history lesson for you. Before Admiral Perry landed in Japan and brought a whole bunch of Western shit with him, one of which was information about medicine and medical science, anatomy and things like that, as Western doctors had been working on and developing in Europe for a long time, okay? So what does that mean? Well, today in a Japanese dictionary, you look up koshi, and this is what they mean. They've come up with another word for thigh and stuff like that. But in the scrolls, especially our scrolls, if you see the word koshi, it's not the thing that we all think of as hip. Koshi was a region, and it ran from here to just above the stabilizer muscles, just above your kneecap. Okay? So if I say hip, or hip is listed on a list, right, from that time period, it could be anywhere in the upper leg to what we think of as the hip, what mommy taught us is the hip, to just above it. Okay. So again, right, people tend to try to translate this stuff based on their modern translation, their modern Western, British, Australian, whatever perspective, viewpoint, knowledge, understanding, right? But the meaning was completely different. Now, here's a question. If we misunderstand something as simple as what the hip was, or what was understood as koshi, what else don't we fucking understand? I don't know, but we can keep assuming, right? I know this is not just me passing this stuff on. These are things that when I learned them, holy shit. Like, okay, uncomfortable part, ego wanting to hold on to, well, we could call it that. Yeah, you can call it Fred too. I don't care, right? But the other thing was a relief, because now I know something that I was missing before, and now I can stop contorting and stop trying to force something a certain way or whatever, because it makes it, the sense that it makes is different. There's a sense of clarity now. Right? I mean, it's hard enough to translate Japanese concepts into English. It's a harder thing to translate Sengoku Jidai period or Sengoku period reference points and Japanese language that most modern Japanese couldn't get right for us to okay. So anyway, all right. So if close range, we're generally talking elbow knee distance, right? You can touch him with those kind of things, forearms, that kind of thing. Very close. He's now way, way close, but I can pop him with an elbow. I can hit him with a hip or a thigh or something like that, right? And then, right, we'll just keep up the simple vocabulary, right? Extremely close range, or extreme, whatever, extreme close range. Okay. So now what we're looking at is head, spine, right? Typically B to B, not business to business, body to body, okay? Body to body contact, okay? So what we're really looking at here, let me change color, right, is we're still looking at long, mid, and close, right? Elbow knee distance in the context of CQC, in the context of close quarter combat, elbow knee distance is the long range in close range scenarios. Very close range shoulder. Shoulder hip, right, is the mid range in this kind of fighting, and this is close, right? So we have long close, mid close, close. Anyway, so again, by breaking it down like this, it's not, we could just go, well, dude, it's all the same fucking thing. So how about if I just practice with my elbows and knees, and I practice with my hips and all? Yeah, I know. But each range, there's a different spatial relationship. In our Koto school, this is called kuraidori. This is the kuraidori in close range combat. You need to be able to understand what kind of space you have, how to create power in less and less space. How do you do that? Because we talked about this close range stuff. You can't do conventional taijutsu because you don't have room for footwork, right? But at this range, I can move my torso because there's this bigger bubble. At this range, I can sink and shift part of my torso. At this range, there's no space. I have to come at that from a very different direction. So this is not as simple as I can, well, you can do whatever you want. But for me and my students, I'm not just lumping this stuff together, because there is a distance thing in here. There is a spatial relationship between the bodies, right? And again, today I'm keeping this within a very simple structure, because there's another part of this that changes these distances. These for today are assuming we're this way. We're nose to nose, or square on. But if I'm where I am and his body's over here and we're working this way, like I tried to do a rear hip throw and he dropped and he's jamming it up and we're kind of in this lock stalemate position, right? That's not elbow range. That's not knee range, right? It's not quite nose to nose range, but it's only part body, right? So how do I break this structure? Because part of this is at close range. Part of this is at standard taijutsu range, right? So it's kind of and I just had a class with my inner circle guys where we were talking about how ninjutsu is like this whole idea of invisibility, this whole idea of creating confusion in his mind and making him suspicious or concerned or worried, or let him just throw caution to the wind because he thinks like we don't know what we're doing, and you see the reviews and the comments that people have, right? That won't work. This is the way, right? You don't know anything. Great, fantastic. You're the guy that I can set up with a certain kamae, and you will think that it's an easy win. Not you, but this person who leaves this comment, and you will just come barrel assing in. Perfect. Okay. The guy who looks at it and goes, who would do that? Like part of him looks like he's covered and protected, but the rest of him looks like he's wide open. So is he protected or is he not protected? Does he know what he's doing or does he not? That's great. That caused this guy hesitation because he's confused. He's not sure. Right? See, we're not just dealing with physical things. Okay? That's why most of our kamae are profiled. Okay? We're only showing him at best half our body. Right? He doesn't get to see what's going on back here. Okay? Bobi teaches you this, Shoshin teaches you this, right? He doesn't know what's going on back here. Okay? So he doesn't have a complete picture. If I fight him like this, he has a complete picture. He knows where all the good targets are. He knows where my weapons are, whatever. But if I do this, it distorts space. It distorts where things are. What might I have in this hand that he can't see, right? All those kind of things, right? This is psychological warfare. So it's the same thing here, right? Again, I'm not working displacement of the bodies. I'm still, right, for this class, because we need to keep this fairly simple, all right? Anyway, again, we're going to be going into more of this stuff during the Friday virtual class. There's the link if you want to get signed up. Please remember, I've been putting this out for the last couple of weeks. We did have a price raise on things because all the cost of all of our services went up. I know this stuff is free to you when you watch it, but it's not free for me to produce. So, sorry. I'd say I didn't have a choice, but most people would go, yeah, you had a choice. Yeah, I know, but if I keep going the way I'm going, eventually I won't be giving free shit to very many people anymore because the bills don't get paid. So anyway, it's just the reality of things. Okay, so 3 scenarios, how we might end up there, a different way to look at close range if we break it down, right? This plays into the Gyokko-Ryu's primary principle of 3 and 1, 1 and 3. We take anything close range and we divide it, break it into at least 3 different aspects so we can get better. This is where mastery lies, right? Anybody can learn shit, but how well do you know it? Okay. The average person just wants vagueness. Okay. Just like the person who's committed enough to practice 18 minutes a day, they've already figured this stuff out. 18 minutes a day will be, give or take, a couple minutes, an hour or two, whatever. At the end of the year, if you practice 18 minutes a day, not much, right? 18 minutes a day, you will have put in 1,000 hours of practice over the course of a year, okay? 12 months, okay? Which will make you better than 95% of everybody else trying to get good at the same thing you're working on. That's mastery. Consistency, okay? So anyway, right, ranges, all right? So let's do this. Actually, let's talk about another problem, okay? So this this type of training, this type of close range training, right? Especially in the context of ninjutsu, but in a lot of other martial arts too, taekwondo and whatnot. And I'm not picking names because the school you went to and the teacher you trained with could be an exception to the rule. Again, based on my experience, and I've only been training in the martial arts since 1975. So have I seen everything? No, of course not, right? However, I've seen more than most, right? So, but this type of training where we're fighting out here and we might do a little bit of this. He grabs my jacket, pop a wrist reversal on him, feel all jazzed about myself, call it a day, right? But it's very often not covered, right? This kind of thing where you're getting really, really good in there. And if it is, well, that's the whole system, okay? You know, every time I was invited to train with somebody who was doing jujitsu, and one of my guys actually, he made his black belt, and then he took some time off and went and did jujitsu. Was it last year? It was either at a Daikomyosai or like one of our spring or fall camps within the last year or two. He did a breakout session on how these things are done. But during these, he said, look, these are devastating techniques. But the problem with that is we don't work on like standing stuff. You already have to agree to get down here with me. Because if I'm on the ground and I'm trying to get you down and you're standing and you got freedom of movement, if you don't play the same game, so if I can't tackle you to get you down, if I can't put you in that kind of condition first, there's an issue, right? But Ninjutsu, all these martial arts have this thing, right? If you don't play by the same game, you have to hope that you can control the situation enough that you're forcing him to play by your rules, which is always a good tactic, good ninja tactic, right? But either way, again, this training is not very often covered. Students tend to learn techniques, and they never take those to a level where they have to adapt them to situations like range. And I know there's henka, there's adaptation and whatnot, but that's like, instead of striking him with an omote-shuto on this side of the neck, you strike him with an ura on the other side of the neck, or you grab him by the face or whatever. So you're substituting one technique for another. You might substitute a kick for a punch, or a punch for a kick, or a grab for whatever. I'm talking about the reality of a fight or an attack where things start out at one range and very quickly change to another range. Or it starts out unarmed, and the next thing you know, this jackwagon pulls a freaking knife or a gun, and the whole scenario is different. What started out as one way turns into something else, okay? And so, things aren't adapted based on the situation, the environment, clothing, shoe type, based on the surface that we're on, whatever, okay? So anyway, so what's often missing is the fact that, again, ranges change quickly, and or an attacker can set you up in a way that you couldn't keep them away to begin with. It's not like they're always coming in from here, right? I could be watching somebody who's the decoy. Next thing you know, I'm in a bear hug, or I'm in a rear choke, or something like that, right? So he didn't break through anything, right? He didn't step up in intimidation before things started to go crazy. This is where I'm starting from, okay? And so this leads to a need to be able to operate in what we call the ura side of training, U-R-A, ura. Ura, okay? Omote, frontal, obvious, normal, standard, whatever, conventional, whatever you want to call it. Ura, backside, hidden, the stuff that most people don't think about, or they ignore, or they dismiss, or they don't even know exists. Okay? This is the game changer. Okay? So, by coming at it from this direction, by looking at this, it doesn't just allow us to understand, it forces us to understand both sides of the training. And that includes, right, it started off, all these guys are like, everybody knows how to fight, man. Just put on freaking boxing gloves and get in the ring and you'll learn. Yeah, but so apparently you've never been in a situation that started out as a fist kind of thing, and next thing you know, this guy grabbed a fucking hammer and decided he was going to come in, right? As a cop, not only did I have to face shit like that was coming at me, but also people I did victim reports or death reports or whatever on, that's the scenario, okay? Or you have a weapon, you got disarmed, and now you better be good because you got all these guys, you know, I got a gun, man. I don't need that like martial arts stuff. Yeah. Okay. What happens if it jams? What happens if you don't drop the safety because your gross motor skills in a life or death situation and that stress is very different than it is on the range, where even in speed drills, you don't have the same kind of shit going on, right? Or anything like that. You go to draw it, and because your hands are all sweaty, it slips right off the grip, and because it got stuck in the holster. Well, it's never going to happen to me. Yeah, okay. Well, then pride goes before the fall, right? So, but if I suddenly can't use this weapon, I better be fucking good at unarmed stuff, or I can't get attached to the fact that this is a knife fight, gun fight, fist fight. I can't. Ground fight, whatever. Right? Shit changes too much, and the nature of warfare is there are no rules. And jackwagon, right? Bad guys don't follow rules. So there we go, right? All right, so let me do this. I'm going to give you 5 suggestions. Do what you want, but 5 suggestions for being more prepared for and bringing your training more into alignment so that you can cover and you handle close range things better. Okay. So I'm not going to pare these down. During Friday's class, we're going to look at some defensive tactics at these different ranges. Okay. It's just very difficult to do while I'm looking at you. Okay. So, but if you get signed up for Friday's class, and you'll get, if you can't be there live, you still get the recording, right? But you'll get some examples of how we can do things at these different ranges. Okay. All right. So let's just do this. Let's pick a color here, right? So 5 suggestions for close range defense, right? And again, not necessarily techniques. Okay. First thing is just, I'm going to put recognize reality. Okay. We also call this general awareness. Okay. So recognize that this can happen and make sure you add it to your training. Okay? And this doesn't mean go out and get ground fighting or judo or whatever and try to like glue it to what you're already doing. Right? The principles and concepts need to match up. Okay. There needs to be this, not just an integrity between who you are and how you act and all that, but an integrity between the principles and concepts of the things you're trying to tack together. Okay. Duplos, right? I have a grandson. Duplos are these big, fat, Lego looking kind of things. I don't know if you've ever seen them or not, right? Legos, little blocks, got these little buttons at the top, little things on the bottom. You can stick these things together, right? Duplos look like big, fat, oversized Legos. But you know what? They don't stick together, right? You can kind of get them to work, but nobody better bump into things. Otherwise, it's going to be like a bad Jenga or House of Cards kind of thing, and shit's going to fall over. Okay. So anyway, I'm not telling you to not do it. I'm not telling you you can't, right? If you're intuitive enough and you can make it work, bless you. Okay. But anyway, right. So the first thing we need to make sure, because we're never going to do anything, right? If we don't have a desire or a passion or an interest or a need to get something done, we're not going to do it. Just like if we don't do the work that needs to be done, we're not getting there either. A lot of people want to learn ninjutsu. A lot of people want to be a master, but a lot of people can't break the habits they have of sitting around for hours a day doing nothing but scrolling or binge watching Netflix or whatever it is. Okay. And there's a trade-off, right? Is it this week's Kuden or next week's Kuden? I'm gonna cover that kind of thing, right? But nothing happens, right? The prize is not coming to you. This is a quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson, right? I'm a history geek. Anyway, right? The prize isn't coming. You got to win it. You got to earn it. Okay. So we need to recognize that this is absolutely something within the realm of self-defense and survival. Just because it's not allowed in a ring in a sport contest doesn't mean that that's the same as some gangbanger deciding that, or some gangbanger applicant. You know, like there's some gangs that the way the 12 to 13-year-olds get into the gang is they have to go to a neighborhood of upstanding people and shoot somebody they don't know. That's their ticket in. If you don't know that that exists in the world, then there's a whole bunch of other attackers that are going to blow your mind as well. Okay. So anyway, so first one, recognize reality. Number two, train to be comfortable. Train to be comfortable and be able to change tactics on the fly at close range. Okay. There was, again, this is based on this class I had last night with my inner circle guys, and we were talking about kamae and things like that. We were also talking about kata and ninjutsu kata, and how there is simultaneously a form to learn from, but there's also a sense of flexibility that and adaptability that goes with it, right? There's this it's structured but adaptable at the same time. Okay, there's this essential nature, this kotsu of the technique, right? But it's often misunderstood by people because as soon as we start working henka or variation, right, people just start doing all kinds of wild and crazy shit. Well, you could do this, you could do this, you could, yeah, just because you can doesn't mean you should, right? Because the model isn't just a structure for where to put your leg and where to put your hand and where to hit something. It's a structure that demonstrates or allows you to practice something in the makimono that's all about the principles and concepts related to timing, distancing, angling, flow, those kind of things. When do I catch him? When should my hand or arm catch him for the uke and the gash? Like, what extension on his arm is best? At what point in time? And why is that the best time? When Hatsumi Sensei said play, there is a sense of playing, but what he's really talking about is experimenting, right? What's too soon? What's too late? What's the wrong damn technique at all? That kind of thing. Do you understand why the technique is what it is? Or did somebody just stick a whole bunch of shit together, slap a cool name on it, and then pass it down so that they could be the grandmaster? That's how people end up fucking inventing their own systems and styles today, right? They want to be that guy, except they don't understand the guy, right? Anyway, number three, develop your Shizen-ken, okay? On the Togakure-ryu list of the Ninja Jiroppo-ken, the 16 fists of a ninja, right? All ninja lists are not finite. That means that the things that's not all there is. On every ninja list, there is at least one item that expands the list way bigger. Okay, so Shizen-ken in ninjutsu, Shizen means natural. Okay, it's usually listed as either number 15 or number 16 on conventional list. Traded off with one called Taiken, which is using the whole body itself. That's, I throw this guy and then drop on him, that kind of thing. Right? Shizen-ken is anything that's not on the list that you could defend yourself with, right? So teeth are not on the list, but you could bite somebody, right? Your chin as a weapon is not on the list, but you could grind that into somebody, right? There's all kinds of things that are on your body that are not listed that just expands the list way out, right? So develop your Shizen-ken and your close range weapons. Okay, more fully. Okay, so we're talking about your head, your shoulders, your forearms, your elbows, your knees, your hips, right? Practice with them more so that you don't end up just bumping somebody. You know how to slam a hip into somebody and not only drop them, but not distort your own frame and then lose your balance and fall down, right? How do I slam somebody with a shoulder without shutting my arm down because I caught a nerve. Because the whole, remember that brachial plexus I talked about? Okay. In other classes where Jumonji covers those things, there's a reason that things aren't in front of our face, right? There's a reason that they're here. And even the fact that we're not wearing armor, right? We're covering things, floating ribs, see it? Floating ribs, brachial plexus, because if we get hit here, on one side, the liver is getting slammed, and on the other side, it's the spleen. You'll drop like a fucking rock, okay? And up here, these are plexus, bundles of nerves that if they get damaged, it's going to be bad enough that you're going to feel it for the rest of your life, however long or short that might be. But part of that bundle includes your phrenic nerves that come down the torso and keeps you breathing properly. And other parts are the vagus nerves that keep this thing doing its thing. Okay? There's certain things that you protect with your life. And that's not a pun. Okay? So develop your Shizen Ken and your close range weapons as much as you're developing these other things. Okay? Number 4, understand Kudai Dori. I talked about this. Okay? Understand. Kudai means space. Okay? It's another way to say space. Dori is catching. So, but this isn't just space as in the environment. It's also a time spatial relationship, right? Dori is to catch, to seize, whatever, right? So I want to understand Kudai Dori at close range. This whole lesson is the lesson of Kudai Dori at close range. Okay? The stuff we're doing on Friday will be Kudai Dori, how to maximize my ability to operate at close, very, and extremely close range. Okay? So again, it's not just distance, but also shape, right? And how that affects distance. Here's a for example. Okay, last night during the black belt class, we were doing sword stuff. Okay, so I was doing Gyokoryu Tojutsu, blade art, right? Kenjutsu is actually a fairly modern term, right? Way back in the day, it was called Tojutsu. There are a bunch of other names for it as well. But we were doing a couple of these basics, and we were also doing something with the Kodachi against a longsword. Okay, and so I was demonstrating whatever, and I went to demonstrate things one more time. And as I checked his blade, I turned to make a point to folks. And if I were in ancient Japan right now, I would have had this eyeball, this eyelid minimum, maybe even the lens of the eyeball split. And you can see really, really closely, right? I would be missing a nostril. Okay. Now we were only working with Boken, but I got caught. Okay. And it bled a little bit, but whatever, right? Training goes on. But here's why it happened. Here's why it didn't happen the other times. As I was doing things, I kept my head this way. So there was a certain distance based on his blade to this as a target. But as soon as I did this, the shape of this corner moved. Let's see if I can do this sideways. The point of my eye is right here. Okay, so I'm going to slide my hand out. And then I'm going to turn my head to look sideways. Can you see the difference? I know. Doesn't seem like it's a lot. Ancient Japan, it had been clear, or losing an eye and having blood, even if I didn't lose the eye, getting the eyelid cut and now having diminished sight in this eye because I got blood rolling into my eye. That's a lot, right? So if I'm in here really, really close with somebody because they jammed up my rear hip throw, right? I may not feel like I could hit him this way because he's like right here. I can't wind up enough. And if I do this, he'll dump me. But I could drop my jaw and turn my head. See it? The space between my head and his head. I turn my head. What's that distance? I just punched through the side of his skull, the side of his temple, by that much. This is the difference. And I'm not calling myself a master by any means. But what I've learned from the masters that I've trained with is it's this shit that takes things to a whole new level. And you're going to be able to do things to him that it's not just a surprise that you hit him. The surprise is after he wakes his ass up and he didn't realize that he doesn't know how you did it, because he will have never seen you turn your head. But he's going to remember the brick that it felt like hit him. Okay? It's very, very different. And the last one is be willing to do what most won't. Okay? Be willing to do what most won't. Okay? Again, there's another one of those major keys to success in any realm, not just fighting. Okay? You need to be willing to do what most want to get whatever goals you're going for. Because you keep doing it like everybody else, or picking and choosing, keep doing what everybody else is doing, you're going to get what everybody else gets, especially in your realm. Okay? What I mean here by this is be willing to bite. Be willing to gouge out an eye. And I don't mean poke him in the eye. I mean grab the side of his skull where your fingers are in the temple over here. The skull has all kinds of cool contours. Be able to grab the skull. Okay? Tear skin or rip his scrotum or his ears off. This is not, I'm not punning. Not very much holds this on. Not very much holds that on. Right? This is not about rules in a ring. Right? Be willing to rip shit off of them. Okay? You have to be willing to do what most won't. Okay? And you have to be able to see targets not as fair or unfair. This whole situation is already unfair. I didn't sign up to get into a ring to fight for a trophy for a win or lose. I was minding my own goddamn business, and Joe Cool Jackwagon decides that I'm a target. This is already not fair. So Joe Cool Jackwagon, okay? That's, these guys that post these things on videos, I kick your ass. If you think that we're going to have the fair fights that you are usually used to having, or we're going to cheat, or you're going to cheat in the same ways that you're used to cheating, which still stays within a box. Okay. Anyway, let's round this out. All right. Did this last episode as well. We're going to do this with 3 goals. Okay. And I've got it written down here in green. I just decided I'm going to use red because I got a white background. We're going to use Christmas colors. Okay. Because you're going to give yourself some gifts. Okay. So call it goal, call it gift, whatever. Goal number 1 with the way you operate needs to be to drop him in place. Drop him in place. This is a Tagagi Yoshinryu principle for those of you in the Bujinkan or in Ninjutsu and know what I'm talking about out of those 9 schools, right? You drop him straight down at your feet. The reason for that, and this is also a Gyoko-ryu thing, all the schools use it, but I can now pin him with my knees and whatnot, because if I knock him away from me, I'll talk about that in a minute, he can regain and he can come back. Or if I knock him away from me, I now need to close range to lock him up. Or as I'm running, I have to hope that this guy can't just kip back up or roll to get up quickly, chase me down, or draw a weapon and shoot me in the back while I'm running away. Okay? So if I drop him to my feet straight down, okay, whether he's unconscious or not, I can control him more and I can pin his limbs. Okay? Goal number 1, drop his ass straight down. Goal number 2, when you can't do number 1, knock him back into play. You know what that means? Knock him back into play. Knock back into play. One of my teachers used to say this all the time, right? Knock him back into play, right? It's kind of like in golf, right? You hit a ball and it goes out of bounds, right? You're allowed to do certain things. You lose a stroke or 2 by tossing it back out onto the fairway, so it's back in play, okay? So I knock him back in play. What that means is we're at very, very close range and I do something, bang, and he stumbles back and now he's in range for me to use my conventional tools. And that's the idea, right? So again, I knock him back into the range that I've been training the most for, right? But again, I have to be careful because if I don't do it the right way, I put that same space between he and he can also reach me. Because at very close range, most people that move in really, really close are grapplers and whatnot. They're not used to getting hit at really close range. They've never been hit with a surface level punch that doesn't pull away to punch them. They've never been hit with one of those, right? They've never taken an elbow or a forearm or whatever because it was all about grappling. It was all about wrestling. You can't do that, man. That's not fair. It wasn't fair that you fucking jumped me. So you want to see not fair? Welcome to my world, okay? So goal number one, drop him in place, straight down. When you can't do that, knock him back into play. Or as goal number three, it's either an alternate to number two, or when you can't do number two, right, do something. I'm just going to stop at not want to. Make him not want to. Not want to what? Not want to touch you, not want to keep fighting, right? Not wanting you to touch him, okay? So goal number three is either an alternate to this, or when you can't do this one, I'm going to do something to make him want to move into the conventional range so I can go back to this, or change his mind and not want to touch you at all. Did I or did I not already mention biting, gouging his or popping his fucking eyeball, right? Hooking his lip, both lips, yank those fuckers apart, okay? Grab behind the ears and then hook. Rip his mouth open, that kind of stuff, right? Grab something and yank it off his freaking body, okay? Make him so defend, okay? So again, this is the messy side of things. This isn't scoring points. This isn't winning trophies. This isn't earning belts. We're on the street, close quarter combat. I get it. People have their boxing things. I don't knock any of that stuff. I'm just not the person to confuse the tactics and strategies you use in a ring with the tactics and strategies I use to save my own life or my family. Ever. Ever. The moment I confuse one with the other, I either end up in jail or I end up in the morgue. Okay? Not a good trade-off. Okay? So anyway, that's what we have. Again, there's the link for Friday virtual training. If you want to make it, great. If you can't make it, there's a recording, right? So you still get that. You get forever access. Okay? But either way, that's the episode for this week. That's my hour. That's my time. Hopefully this serves you, whether or not you ever train with me personally or whatever. I hope that I've given you enough. Well, I know that I've given you enough to drop into whatever you're doing. And this isn't always about ninjutsu. You can drop this into anything that you're currently doing and seriously level up your shit. Okay? So that's what I have. I will talk to you again next time, hopefully. And if not, be well. Otherwise, I'll see you next time.